All right, it is 9:30, so I'm going to start up. Um, like I said, it's 9:30. Yesterday, of course, I foolishly must have left the mic muted. So if for some reason people cannot hear me, please send me an email right away. And you might say, well, how can we do that if we can't hear you? It's 9:30, so the class should have started. So if, again, if you wouldn't be hearing anything, I would ask that you let me know. All right, today is day 17. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do another Flexbox example right now. All right. And I'll explain to you exactly what it is. I'm going to show you the finished product in just a moment. Tomorrow, I'm going to hand out hands-on test number 3, which basically covers chapters 1 to 9 with the heavy emphasis on 8 and 9. You will have the test emailed to you by 7 a.m. tomorrow. I'll go over the instructions starting at 8:05. Usually takes 10 or 15 minutes, and I'll tape that. And the test will be due by Sunday. So you're getting virtually all period, both Thursday and Friday to work on it. So what will we do Sunday will be both your hands-on test and your chapters 8 through 9 written tests, labs, and homework. All right, so let's get rid of this one. Now, I want to show you what I'm going to make, but before I do, and I will, it's right here, all right, I want you to see this. Most of you in this class, this is your first class. Not everybody, but most of you in this class. What you are required to do, and you're going to get a copy of this, what you are required to do by the end of the semester, all right, and actually that's date is going to be wrong. It's really going to be, it's going to be Wednesday, but is you have to create an electronic portfolio. Now, before that's due, I will show you what the electronic portfolio looks like. All right. I will show you what you have to do. But by midnight, I don't know how many weeks that is from now, 5 or 12, 13, whatever it is, but 12/20, you will have to turn into me an electronic portfolio. You can do this electronic portfolio in a lot of different ways. All right. And what I mean is you can do it just using HTML, CSS, etc., which is what I'm going to do for you in just a moment. Or you can use a package like Bootstrap that we're going to be going over in a couple weeks. Or there's even a tool that I'm going to show you that you can download for free. And it's literally a drag and drop tool. And I'll show you that on another day. And you can probably create your portfolio in about 10 or 15 minutes using that. All right. There's advantages and disadvantages to each one. And I'm not going to go over them right now. But this is what you're going to have to do. And like I said, I'll send this piece of paper out to you later today. But the point is, what we want on this electronic portfolio, and you're going to have your choice. You can write separate pages like we've been doing so far, or you can write one big page that has a landing page area, an about you area, an area that lets you open up your resume, a portfolio area, and a contact area. That's what I built, and I'm about to show you in just a couple minutes. So we'll go over all the particulars for this, but not today. All right. So let me show you what I'm going to build. You're welcome to code along with me, and I will tell you as we start. All right. This is my work, but I took a class a couple years ago online, and one of the things that we did in that class was we created an electronic portfolio. And this is basically what I ended up doing with it. All right. And is it great? No, it's acceptable. Let's put it that way. And what you will see is, whoops. So this is it. There's going to be an area all about you at the top, or an area showing my picture, etc. at the top. Then there'll be an all about me area, and that's just garbage text. Then there'll be portfolio examples, and then there'll be a contact page, and then there'll be a footer at the bottom. So a header at the top and a footer at the bottom. All right. And you'll see as I make this smaller that it is responsive as well. I'm not saying it looks fantastic, but I think it looks more than presentable. So there's what it would look like probably on a phone, and on a tablet, it would look more like this. Okay, again, I still don't think it looks too bad. So I'm going to build this thing right now. All right, now I'm not going to save it. And I'm going to tell you right now why I'm not going to save it and put it out on GitHub. Because when I've done things like this in the past, then what most people seem to end up doing is their project becomes a copy of my project. That's not what's supposed to happen. All right, you're supposed to create something that is uniquely you. Ideally, a year from now, you guys are going to be going to the Rankin Technical College job fair, and you're going to be passing out your resume, etc. And one of the things on that resume is going to be a link to your electronic portfolio. And the last thing in the world I'd want to see would be if there's 10 or 12 of you or whatever that are doing that, and a prospective employer looks at them and they all look the same except the picture. All right, that would be really silly, and that's not what we'd want. So I'm going to do this. Again, you can follow along with me, all right, or not. I think we can do this in the 2 hours and 20 minutes we have left and still sneak in a couple quick breaks. So I'm going to start by going in here, and I'm going to create a folder, and I'm just going to call it Portfolio. Right? There's nothing in it right now. There it is. And I'm going to immediately open it up using VS Code. As you can see, nothing in there. And I'm going to start by making an index.html file. All right, and we'll work on that in just a moment. But I'll also create a folder in here. I'm going to create 2 folders. The first one is going to be called images, and I'm going to drag my images in just a little bit. And then I'm going to create another folder in here as well, and it's going to be my CSS folder. All right, and in that CSS folder, like we've been doing virtually all semester, I'm going to create a new file that I'm just going to call styles.css. And just to make sure it works, I'm going to put in here background color red. Whoops, yeah, red. I got to do it for the body. Body background color red. Just to see if we're able to hook up to it and everything looks fine, and it should. So let me do a file save on that, and then I'm going to go back to my index file. Now in here, we're going to use our little cheat in here, so I'm going to put the exclamation point and hit tab. All right, and then in here, I'm going to do a couple things. First of all, I'm going to change the title to Electronic Portfolio. All right, and then next, I'm going to make sure that I'm able to link to that style sheet. So link rel equals style sheet css / styles.css. So when I run this, there's absolutely nothing in here, but it should be red if it all works. And there it is. So it looks at least right now, it looks like it's working. Good. And you can see it says electronic portfolio up there in my title, just like I told it to. So I'm going to go back to styles, and I'm going to get rid of that. I don't need that. That was just a check to make sure it works. Now, there's going to be a few things today that we're going to go through that you might say, well, you didn't tell us that earlier. Okay, then I'm sorry. All right. But I want to show you a couple shortcuts. All right. Such as, well, believe it or not, we're basically done in here. I'm not going to have any other spreadsheets. I'm just going to use the standard Arial font. All right. And I'm not going to have anything, no JavaScript in here. And I'm not going to be linking to Font Awesome or anything like that. So that section right there through my head section, basically, that's all done. All right. So I'm going to go down to the body. All right. Now I'm going to do something, and I'm going to do it a little bit differently than you probably have seen it before. And if you say why or what, let me do it for you and run it and show you. because this is basically a shortcut. So I'm going to say div ID equals navbar. And you've seen this kind of thing before. All right. And in here, I'm going to put a nav, and I'm going to put 4 links. We copy this. So I'm going to have a home part on here. I'm going to have an about part on here. I'm going to have a portfolio part on here. And I'm going to have a contact part on here. Now, for right now, I'm not going to change these. I'm going to leave them all set to home. Why? Because I haven't created the about part yet. I haven't created the portfolio part yet. I haven't created the contact part yet. But hopefully you'll notice this. If you look right now, I've done no CSS. There's nothing in here. All right. And just to be sure, file, save. Now I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to do a file, save. And I'm going to open this. And notice what we get. Now it just says home, 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 home. Don't worry about that. All right. But the point is, it already set this up for me without me having to go into my nav section and do a lot of work in here. All right. And it's a shortcut. So you might say, okay, great. Why didn't you show that to us later? And I guess I will put in here about portfolio and contact. All right. The reason that I wanted you to create your own as opposed to doing it this way is what you're going to find is out in the field. If you end up maintaining someone else's work, there's a very good chance that they will have done their own navigation like we've been doing it. All right, now that I changed those words in there, all right, if we look at it again, there's what it looks like. Now I've got it blown way up. All right. We put nothing in there so far, nothing as far as any CSS goes. All right. So let's put in a little bit of CSS in here. Okay. And just so we can start with, get our nav bar. So what we're going to do is this. We just built the nav bar section and we're going to do some CSS. Then we're going to build the home section and do some CSS. Then the about section and some CSS, the portfolio and some CSS, the contact and some CSS, and at the very bottom, we'll do the footer and then some CSS. All right. Okay, so I'm going to move over to styles here and I'm going to start putting some stuff in here. I'm going to come in and put in my own global reset thing in here. So I'm going to come in here and do this. We could put in a normalize or anything. It would have been fine. But I'm going to say margin 0, padding 0 to turn off any margin or padding. And I'm going to say that box sizing, border box. Now, if you don't like the definition that I've given you so far on border box, again, what it's saying is when you are figuring out the size of content, just use the content itself. If you have put in there extra padding or extra margin or a border, don't count that in the size. The size should be basically set up by, all right, the content itself. Now, I'm not going to save this or run it because nothing would look different right now, really. But I'm going to come in here and start making some changes. So body, font family, and we've got our Arial in here. There's that Arial Helvetica and sans serif. Now, normally, what you would want to do in yours is you'd want to go out to Google Fonts and pick out a font. Pick out one, there's more than 1,500 of them in there. You're probably not going to take an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours to look at all of them, but look through an array of them, see if there's something that kind of reflects your personality. All right, so I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to set a color. So this is going to be my default color. It's a little bit lighter black, all right? Because remember, 000 is black. So it is black, all right, but it's a lighter black. Okay, now I'm going to come in, and I didn't make a wrapper yet, but I'm going to make one in just a minute, all right? And all I'm going to do in here is I'm going to set the background color, and I'm going to set it to pound DDD. And as you can see, it's a grayish. But before we come through and do that, I want to do the stuff for my nav bar. So again, everything that you saw up here, all right, these are basically, and you've seen this before, these are our global settings, all right? And what we're about to do right here, these are going to be our nav bar settings. All right, so let's start putting in the stuff for the nav bar. And I'm going to put it all in, but I want to explain to you what we're doing as we're doing it. Now, this had an ID of navbar. All right, so I'm going to put about 7 or 8 things in here. Position fixed. All right, I don't want it to move, basically. Top 0, we're going to look at all this in just a minute. Left 0. Height 4 rem, so it's going to be about 64 pixels high. Background color, I made it real simple, black. All right. Display block with 100%. And even though we really don't need it, I put a Z index in here and I gave it the number 10. There's no other Z index in here. So what that is saying is this nav bar should always be in the foreground. Now, the position fixed is just that. We've talked about it before. All right, we've got a fixed position. All right, top 0 and left 0, that is the upper left-hand corner of your screen if you see my mouse jumping around there. It's not the origin like you're used to if you graphed stuff back in junior high, but it's the screen position, and it's the upper left-hand corner. So that's where we're saying we want to place this. The height, hopefully that just makes sense with the background color. We want it to display block. It should be anyway, but we don't want it to display we're saying display block. In fact, I don't even think we needed that, but we'll leave it anyway. The width is going to take up the whole thing. All right, so that's not everything though. There's a few more things that we want to add. Okay. All right, and that is for our nav bar, and we're going to create another thing in just a bit that's going to be a class called row. So don't worry about it right now. But for both of those, we want to display flex. Now, you already learned about this over the last 2 days. What that will do is that we'll take our nav bar and it will make it a flex container. So everything that goes into our nav bar, excuse me, everything that goes into our nav bar, they will now be flex items. All right. And what we're really concerned with in here, if you look, there's no UL and LIs in here. All right, so we're going to jump right into pound nav bar, nav A, right into those links. All right, so now we're basically going to take those hyperlinks and we want to say, I'm going to use a shortcut here, flex 0, 0, 25 VW. Now, why that? Because yesterday we talked about view height and view width. All right, so again, you're going to see this in just a couple minutes. Text align center. Font size, and again, this is the kind of thing you'd want to play around with, but I made it 2 rem, color, all right, kind of a grayish, Text decoration, none. We don't want any underlines on these things. Height, 4 rem. Line height, 2 rem. And cursor pointer. All right. So that's what I'm putting in there. There's only one more thing I want to do, then we'll take a look at it. All right. So we've got all that, and I'm going to come down here. I'm going to grab this and copy it. Everything up to here. All right. And the only reason for that is I wanted to put a hover in there. So when we're hovering over it, I'm just basically going to change the colors. So where before in here, as you see, I'll just make the background color. Oops, 222. We looked at just a bit ago. All right. Now what doesn't it like here? I didn't say hover. There we go. All right. So the background color is now set and our text color is now set. All right. So again, let's do this first. Let's save it. And let's look at it. All right. Well, you say, well, that looks terrible. But remember, when I go back to 100%, there it is at 100%. Now, again, it's not perfect, but it's not terrible either. All right. And we'll go take a look at it in just a moment. Now, notice I get the pointer, etc. All right. Looks like I should have had some space in here and I don't. I'll look at that in just a moment. I'm not concerned with that. But what we did, again, when we started is we came in here and we said div ID equal nav bar. All right. Then we put our nav section in here and just put in our hyperlinks. All right. So that's the first thing that we've done in here. Then we went in and started to style this. All right. So again, we've got and originally I didn't have this in there. I don't know if that's going to matter or not. So let me look at this quick. I'm going to remove the margin and padding. I didn't originally turn those off. I just want to see if I put those back in, if it makes it look a little bit nicer. Not really. Okay. All right, so I guess it doesn't matter. So we've got our box sizing, border box. We've set our font family and our color. All right, this is going to be in a wrapper in just a couple minutes. All right, and then we set a bunch of stuff for our nav bar. Okay, again, the position is fixed, the top and left, the height of it, the background color. All right, the display block, the width, and the z-index. Well, one thing I think you noticed was all those things were kind of stuck together. So we're going to look at those in just a moment. All right. Then we've got our nav bar, and that should have said nav bar nav. All right. We should have had the name in there of what we were using. That might have been what screwed it up. We'll see in a minute. Nav bar nav, and we're going to have a row class in just a moment. All right. Then for the actual links themselves, okay, we set this up to take up 25% of our width of the screen. Okay, it should be aligned in that 25%. It should be that size, should be that color, no underlines. The height of the nav bar itself should be there. The line height for what goes in there is shown. All right, and then finally we set up a hover. Let me save this. Go back to here, and we'll go back to here. There, that looks a little bit better. All right. Now, what's going to happen when we end up playing around with this a little bit later is right now, that's it at 100%. So again, I could make it real big and it's going to look terrible. all right? And I can make it a lot smaller. But what we're going to want to eventually have happen, let me make this back to 100%, is when we go in and we start to make this smaller, you can see what happens. It's not responsive. So later, and I'm not going to do it now, but later when we attempt to make this responsive, we're going to change the size of what's in here. All right, the text size is going to change. All right, now I can play around with it more if I want. I could put some margin top on here to push these down. If that's too much room in between, there's all sorts of things that could be done. All right, but I'm not going to do anything else. I'm going to leave it like that because otherwise we're never going to finish. All right, so that's it then for the nav bar section. So again, I'm going to even, not that we have to do this. So this is our navigation bar right there. All right, so from the navigation bar, again, we're going to try to take this and make this thing that we're working with, try to make it, for lack of better words, at least fairly HTML5 compliant. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter a couple times here. You don't have to, but I'm going to put a main in here. All right, so I'm going to put everything up until I get down to my footer. I'm going to put it all inside of main. All right, so main is going to have in it a bunch of sections, but I also want to take, be able to grab things collectively if I want to. Typically what people do is they put a div in here with an ID that's equal to wrapper. Doesn't have to be wrapper, it can go by different names, but that's what I'm doing. All right, and now in here, I'm going to start making my sections. Okay, so the first section, I'm going to give it an ID of home. All right, it is my home section. And I'm going to give it a class that's going to be equal to page. All right, because it's basically, it's a page that's in here. All right, now there's only going to be 4 or 5 lines in this thing. All right, and I'm trying to introduce you to some terminology that you are going to be seeing once we move into Bootstrap. All right, and that's why we did this once before. I'm going to make a div in here with a class that's going to be equal to Jumbotron. Jumbotron is basically, it's a term that's equated with Bootstrap. All right, and in this Jumbotron, I'm going to make an H2, and I'm going to have my name. So of course you'd put yours. Now I don't know if I've set this up to word wrap or not. Now I have. Okay. Underneath that, some kind of a little tag. And this is what I put. Maybe it's a little corny, but ready, willing, and able to be hired. And again, you wouldn't necessarily have to put anything in there. All right. But I just put a little tag in there. All right. Next, I want to put in my picture. All right. So this is going to be an image. The source is going to be equal, and I don't have it in there yet, but it's going to be in my images folder. There's nothing in there yet. And I just brought in a picture of me that I found online, and I called it me.jpg. All right. And I put an alt tag in there because that's good practice. So I said picture of Jeff Scott. All right. And literally, that's everything in the first section. Now, we haven't done any formatting of it yet, but let me come in and first do a file, save all. Then I'm going to go over, and because I've already got this where I was working on it earlier, but I'm going to go in and I'm going to grab everything that's in my images, except I didn't use that one. So I'm going to grab all these images that are in here. I'm going to copy them to the clipboard, and I'm going to bring them into my images folder, which was empty. But you notice now, if I bring this up, there's my picture. All right, so it will be in there now. Now remember, we have done no CSS on this. So you can see what it looks like. Not much, all right? But it does have in there, okay, ready, willing, and able to be hired. You might say, well, wait a minute, what about that H2? It's being hidden right now, all right? Why? Because we have to go in and write a little bit of CSS for it, all right? So we're going to do that right now. So again, as I said, I'm going to keep jumping back and forth between the HTML and the CSS. All right. Now we've got our wrapper in here. It did put that coloring in, so that's good. All right. I also put in a class of page, and I'm going to use that class for each section that's in here. I'm going to tell it to automatically adjust its height, but I am going to give it a min height. And this may look a little strange. I'm going to set it to 100 VH. In other words, I want to try to set it up so by default, unless told otherwise, each section that's in here is going to occupy the entire screen. So somebody's going to have to scroll to work their way through it. Now, I didn't implement scrolling in here, and the reason I did not implement it is that it involves JavaScript, which we have not talked about yet. We may go back later after we start getting into JavaScript and go back to this file and implement the JavaScript just so you can see what it's about. All right, I added some padding in here. Now, I'm not going to take the time to explain things like background color, etc. I just talked about min height with you. There's padding in here because I want to basically, that's going to end up pushing. Remember what padding does. It's going to take everything that I put in there and it's going to basically put some blank area all around there. And if you say I don't get it, you will in just a minute, but I want to put in my Jumbotron stuff first, and then we'll take a look at this. All right. So the first thing I want is the Jumbotron itself. Now, I did this just to show you RGB. Now, I could put in 255, 255, 255. That's white. You can see that it's white. All right, but I'm going to put in here 0.5. That's an alpha amount. That is an amount of alpha. What that means is, we talked about this the other day, that if we took that and we set it equal to 1, all right, it would be totally opaque. In other words, it would look just the way you'd expect it to look. If we set it to 0, it would be totally transparent, so it would be like see-through. So we're putting it halfway in between there. So it's going to look a little bit washed out. And I put that there so, again, if you decide to work and do something like this, you can play with it yourselves and see what you think. All right, so I'm going to set the width of this to 80% of the screen. I'm going to put some margin in there. And that's going to be my top and bottom. But in my sides, that's a little trick by putting auto in there. That should automatically center my left and my right sides. Put a small border on here. I don't remember if the color looked okay. Usually when you make things white, it can have almost an adverse effect. We'll make it a little rounded. All right, so that's the Jumbotron itself. And the Jumbotron had in it, if you remember, it had an H2 and an H3. All right, so For the H2, the first thing we're going to do is this is something you haven't seen yet, because it's in a later chapter. All right. Text transform uppercase is going to take that H2, and regardless of whether I put it in originally in uppercase, lowercase, or mixed case, it's going to take everything that's in there and put it into uppercase. Text transform is a nice thing if you want to force something into an upper or a lower case, and I believe there's also a title case. We'll talk about that in one of the later chapters. All right, I'm going to set the font size, make it pretty big, and I'm going to make it black. So that is my H2. All right, then I want to do the H3. And again, I'm going to set the font size. Now, since my other one was 3 rem, I don't want it to be as big, so I'm going to make it 2 rem. All right, and for the color, I could just make it black like the other one, but I put pound 222, which is a little bit lighter black. All right, it won't show up much, but just so you see that. All right. Now, I'm not going to do anything to the image. We could do something to the image if we wanted to. I could put a border around it. I could give it a background. We could do whatever we wanted to do. But let's see what it looks like now. All right. So there's what we've got so far. It is not right now. All right. This is our first section that we're doing here. All right. It is not right now responsive. I just want you to realize that. But it's the first. So again, this is home right here. That's our home. Now, do you have to do it like this? I'm showing you a way it could be done. There is no such thing in here when you are doing your electronic portfolio over how it should be done. You will have some requirements that say you must do this and this and this and this. All right, but how you implement those is going to be up to you, not up to me. All right, so the next thing that we want to put in there is basically, for lack of better words, kind of an about me type of thing that's going to go down below that. So we're going to put that in next. And when we do that, just so you know, I'm going to close a bunch of this stuff. But when we do that, I'm going to go out to lipsum.org. Spelled it wrong. All right. So I can get some garbage text. All right. Just so you know that. All right, and I'll go grab that later. In fact, I'll just put it here. I won't need this much, but I'm going to put in 8 paragraphs. So there they are. All right. So then going back into here and going back into my index here. So we've got our first section is done, our first of 4 sections. So I'm going to now start on the second section. All right. So this again will be another section. The ID is going to be equal to about. Now, notice the ID is home. And notice the ID is about. Why? Because we want to be able to jump to home, or we want to be able to jump to about. All right, and as you probably guess, when we do the last 2 sections, one of them is going to have an ID of portfolio, and the other one will have an ID of contact. All right, again, hopefully what I'm saying here is, starting to resonate and make some sense to you. And just like with the other one here, we're going to have a class equal page. All right, so if there's things that we want to make sure that every part of this has, we can implement it in there. All right, so I put an H2 in there, and I said all about me. All right, okay. Then what I want to basically be able to do is set up the equivalent of what we would call a row. All right, with 3 columns in it. This is going to be very similar to on the test. I'm going to do it like this. So I'm going to come in here and say div class equal, whoops, I don't know why I keep doing that, but I do, row. All right. And for whatever reason, when I did that and hit enter, I lost my, let's try this again. There's a shortcut for this in case you don't know it. All right. I can come in here and type in div class equal row, okay? And there it worked. Not a problem. But there is a shortcut because, again, the editor that we have has got Emmet included with it, and Emmet has some shortcuts. Like what? I'm going to type in here dot, which means class, dot row, and I'm going to hit tab. And you can see it does the same thing for me. Now, that's not that fantastic, but I just did want you to see that. All right, now I'm going to put another class in here. So I'm going to say dot col and hit tab. Now I've got a row, and that row has within it a column. All right, and I'm going to make one more class in here. So I'm going to say dot main. This isn't the same main that we used up here. All right, this is just something, this is going to be the main stuff that we're putting in here. All right, so now I want to go and grab some stuff. I'm not even going to put it in paragraphs because I've got this main section. That's how I formatted it. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab this. Again, I might have to grab a little more or a little less. I don't know. All right, and you can see that it is formatted. All right, so I want 3 of these. So the easiest way to do this, where you don't have to sit and watch me type and copy some stuff, is I'm going to grab this whole thing right here, up to there. I'm going to copy it to the clipboard, and I'm going to come down here and paste it in twice. All right. Now, that's not normally the way I would do it, but it is how I've done it in here. Like I said, because I want to make sure we can get through this and look at it, all right, by the end of class. Now, it's not styled yet, so it's going to look pretty crummy. Okay, I think you'd agree it looks pretty crummy. Now, notice this is still taking up 100% because I set it to 100 VH for the height. Now, so is this. And hopefully, at least, hopefully, if I'm down here and I click home, okay, I went back. When I'm at home and I click about, so that's working. That's a start. All right. Okay, so let's go in and let's do some formatting in here. So again, we're about to come in and format some stuff in here. Okay. Now, I don't really remember. I don't think there's going to be a lot of formatting that we're going to do, but let's take a look. So I'm going to jump back into here. All right. You remember that one thing I said earlier was when we set this up, we said if you've got a class of row, display flex. So in other words, those columns that are inside of my row, those columns are automatically flex items. All right. Now I could have done this just nav bar nav display flex and then come down here and said dot row display flex, and it would have been fine. Could do it any way we want to. But we've got a class called col. All right. And I'm going to come in and say flex 1. All right. Border 1 pixel. Should spell border, right? Border 1 pixel solid. CCC. All right. Kind of a gray. And then some padding. Now, when I did this, that's all that I put in. All right. But what you're going to see is by doing it like this, so file, save, all right, by doing it like that, and then coming in here and running it, it's pretty small. We've got the borders in here now. So we've got 2 things that we can do. All right. The first thing I'd like to do, and I'm going to do it for you right now, is I'd like to do a little bit of work on this. I'd like to make the all about me bigger. I'd like it to be centered. And then I think I'm going to take the size of the font that's in here and center that as well. Or not center it, I'm sorry, make it bigger as well. All right. So this was an H2. So I'm going to come in here and in here, all right, let's see, I want to go back and look at it. So this was inside of a row. In fact, it wasn't. This was in a section called about. So I'm going to say dot about, or I'm sorry, pound sign about H2, and then that'll be this right here. About H2. And the first thing I'll do is center it. And I believe I made the other one. I don't remember, but with that H2, well, look at what we did. We made this font size. Okay, I'll just do the same thing that we did here for the Jumbotrons H2. Okay, not there. Except I should have left that in there. So that text align center. All right, we'll move that over. Let's save it. Go back and look. And now that looks a little bit better. All right. Now, the other thing I can do in here is, like I said, I can make this text bigger. But what I'm going to do is, just so you see this, I am going to make it bigger. So I'm going to come in here and I'll say font size. Let's make it, I don't know. Let's look at 1.5 rem. I don't know if that's too big, too small. I have no idea. All right, that looks a little bit better. Okay, now I can play with that. I can add more text. Think about this. With the all about me, what do you want to put in here? This is your chance to start selling yourself, for lack of better words. All right. Now, I'm not saying that that's what you'd want to do, etc., but what you put in here is going to be really and truly up to you. But I'm looking at this right now, and for lack of better words, it looks blah. All right, not that this is exciting, but there's a little color to it and there is an image, but this just looks blah. So I think I am going to come in and put a little bit of more CSS in here. All right, and how am I going to do that? Well, we've got the column, but remember all this stuff that's in here, the about, etc. But everything with that column, that's all in that thing called main. All right, so that is all in the class that we called main. So I'm going to style that a little bit. I think it'll look a little nicer when we do this. So I'll set the background color. Again, I'm keeping this simple. So I'm setting it, not the black, I'm just the opposite. Setting it to white. I'll give it a minimum height. So if there was not that much text in here, I want it to take up at least 60% of the screen. All right, I'll give it some padding. And really, I should have set the font size probably in main, not in col. All right, so I'll set the font size right here. All right, now is there anything else I want to do? Yeah, it's kind of hokey, but I'm going to do it anyway. And that is, I'm going to come in here and in main, I'm going to say the first letter of each column, I'm going to give it a bigger font size. So instead of the font size being 1.5 rem, I'm going to double it. So font size, and that might be let's try 2.5, 2.5 rem. Again, I'll make sure it's black. And I want to do another text transform uppercase. All right, so if for some reason it wasn't uppercase, I'm forcing it to be so. All right, so let's do a file, save, and let's take a look at it now. All right, does that look better? I mean, again, it's always a matter of opinion. These wouldn't be the same thing. Like I said, you could have information about you here and maybe your career at Rankin. You might have another picture of you here working or whatever. You might have something over here about things that you're interested in outside of school, for example. I'm just giving you some examples of things that you could at least potentially put in here. All right. So we're done with our second section. And as you saw, we can now jump back and forth between those two. Now you'll notice these don't work yet because we don't have a portfolio and we don't have a contact. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just give one break this afternoon or this morning, but I'm going to go and do the portfolio one. And after we do the portfolio one, we'll take a break. All right, we'll take about 15 minutes, recharge, and then finish this up. All right, so I'm going to go back in here now, and I'm going to go back into my index HTML. All right, so I've now got my second section created. That was in here. All right, and I don't know why, but I got some blanks area in here, so I'll get rid of that. And now I'm going to make my next section. So again, section ID equal portfolio. And again, class equal page. All right. Now with this one, just so you know, this is where you'd put in samples of your work. All right. Now I could have grabbed some of my samples, but instead what I did was I went out to the internet and grabbed some pictures of sites from there. So there's one, four, I made 6 of them. All right, so that's what I'm going to use in here. Maybe that's a little, I don't know, that's not really cheating, but that's the way that I did it. All right, so, all right, in here, what do I want to do? Well, I'm going to start with an H2, and I'll put in here portfolio samples. All right, and what I want, if you remember, if you look at the finished product here, if you look at the finished product, all right, that looks pretty much the way it does now. So does that. But now this is what I want. All right. So I've got 6 different things I want to put in here. And again, with me trying to introduce some of the concepts that you're going to learn in Bootstrap, each one of these 6 things is going to be what's called a card. And cards can have different things in them. You'll see that more in Bootstrap, but our cards are going to have what? An image. They're going to have an H3 or whatever that is, a small little bit of paragraph, and a button. The button's not going to go anywhere because these are not my samples. But what you could do is if you were out trying to impress a potential employer, you could have that go to GitHub, for example, to that particular repository. Now, to do that, of course, you'd have to make that public so they could look at it. But I'm just showing you an example of a thing that could be done in there. All right, so that's what we want to do in here. Okay. So under the H2, I'm going to make a div, and the class is going to be equal to cards. No, not card, because my class of cards are going to, this class is going to hold each individual card. All right. And what is that? What do I mean? Well, again, it's going to be class card. So let's put dot card there. Now we've got that. So cards is on the outside, card is on the inside. And I'm going to put in here an image. And this was website 01. You should always put an alt tag in here. You've heard this before. All right, so alt equal, I'll just say first website. All right, probably would want a better thing than that. And I'm going to put in here also a class equal center. I want to make sure that these are going to be centered when I get all done. Okay, so I've got that. So there's my image. And under that image is going to be all that junk that was out there. In other words, an H3 tag, a P tag, and a button. All right. Well, I want to be able to style all that stuff. So I just call that's the output. In fact, we could call it whatever we want, filler or whatever. All right, so it'll say website example 1. I don't know what I did there, but, and then we'll have a paragraph. And I made it short, so I'm going to say here, lorem 7, give me 7 lines of junk. All right, and then I put a button in here. And again, none of this has been styled yet, so get the source. All right, now, like I said, this has not been styled yet. So when you look at it, it's going to look not like this. It looks like that. There's no styling on it yet. All right, but that's okay. And I want to set it up so I want 6 of these. So what I'm going to do again, so you don't have to watch me type, is I'm going to grab everything I've got in here in between here. So that is a card right there. And I'm going to copy that to the clipboard and I'm going to paste it in 5 times. I now have 6 cards. Well, of course, I would want to come in and start making changes to these. So there was my first one, first website center, etc. Well, this will be 2. This will say second website. And this will be website example 2. I'm going to leave the same text in here. I could put different text in, but I'm just, like I said, just and if I forgot to do anything, hopefully it'll show, okay, that I've forgotten to do it. So this is 4, 5, and 6. And again, as I've already told you, this has got no formatting on it whatsoever. All right, so this does say 6, 6, 6th, 5, 5, 5th, 4, 4th, 4, 3, 3rd, 3, 2, 2, 2nd, 2, and 1, 1st, 1. Okay, so file, save. Let's take a look at what it looks like now. Okay, it looks exactly the way we told it to do because there's been no formatting yet. So it doesn't look very pretty, so to speak. But we're going to go back right now. We're going to go into our CSS and start working with this. All right. Okay. So let me jump back again. And I think I've saved, but I'm going to do a file save. And I'm going to jump back into my CSS here. All right. And I'm working my way down. Well, remember, we had a thing that was called cards. And our cards hold our card. 6 different examples of a card. So this will be a display flex to make that a flex container. I do want it to wrap. In other words, eventually, I don't want all 6 of them to be one, on the same row. Okay. And we're going to set them up so there'll be 3 in one row and then 3 in the next row. We'll also justify content. And we will use space around. You can see there's space around, there's space between, and there's space evenly. So this is something that you would want to go in and take a look at and see which one of these you think looks the best. And of course, that would be what you would want to use. All right. All right. So we've done our cards. Now let's do a card. Remember, a card is an instance of cards. All right. Well, the first thing is we're doing the shortcut here. We're telling it to take 30%. And when you think about it, 30 times 3 is 90. So that's 90% of my screen. And since we've got the flex wrap there, it should wrap after we have 3 of them in there. Now, the reason I'm putting in 30 I originally put in 33.3, but we want a little bit of padding and margin in there as well. All right, so boy, oh boy, Jeff. You may or may not remember this, but this, oops, 0.625 rem, that's 10 pixels. All right, for the sizing. And margin, again, nothing, oops, nothing. Then I want 0.625 rem on the top and bottom and nothing on the sides. All right, so there's my card. I'm setting it up to flex. So again, it is going to end up, as you can see right there, taking up 30% of my screen size. Well, one thing that means is when we shrink the screen size, we're going to have to change that number. All right, and we'll do that later. But that's the stuff for the card. All right, next, because we want this to be responsive, we're going to put .card image. And if you remember, saying max width 100% is one way to help attain, all right, responsive web design. It should basically fill up its container as it expands and as it contracts. All right. I also said that I wanted those images to be centered. All right. And what does that mean? Well, I'm putting in here a display block, a margin left and a margin, whoops, a margin left auto, and there's shortcuts. So let me put it in like this: margin left auto, margin right auto. Now, if I wanted to put in, I could have just said margin 0 auto. So this one line right here, this line is the same as saying these two lines. All right. I just put it in as two lines. It doesn't matter in the end. So I've now got an image, and that image, hopefully at least, is going to be centered. But I've got other stuff in here. All right. Such as, well, that card has got an H3 in it. Each card has an H3 in it. So again, let's do a text transform, and we'll make that uppercase. All right. Let's center it with a text align center. Let's give it a font size. This might be a little big, but we'll see. Of 2 rem. Let's remove the padding, and let's remove the margin. And the reason we can do that is we've already set that stuff up here for the card itself. So we want to say anything that the system would add to it. We don't want that. We just want our stuff in it. All right, so that's the first thing. Now you'll also remember, okay, we've got at that output area. So when you look here, this is, if you look, we've got cards, card, card image, and card 3. What do I mean? Well, cards, card, the image, and the H3. All right. In fact, at H3 that we've got right there, what I can do is I can change that H3 if I want to, but I'm going to leave it where it is. All right. I'm going to leave it just as it is. All right. So that'll be that H3. All right. What else do I want to work on in here? Well, that whole thing, remember, is inside of something called output. All right. So let's put padding in there. All right, forgot my colon. And really, because I want to be a good developer, all right, what I should do is I should put this before this. And speaking of trying to be a good developer, because I kind of already got away from it, you'll notice we've got global settings, we've got nav bar, but I can come down here and say wrapper, page, jumbotron, about section, cards. Again, what comments you put in here, how you put them in, etc., would of course be up to you. All right. So there's cards, and that is card. All right. I think that's about all we need. All right. So after our H3, okay. Oh, let's see. I'll just leave it like that. But we had other stuff in there as well. All right. What do I mean? Well, you remember that under the H3, we had a paragraph. All right. And really, I should say here, well, I'm going to leave it like that. Okay. I should have said dot output. All right. So output, because that's where it is. I'm looking in here and I'm wondering, because I moved some stuff around. All right. Originally, I think that inside of here, I had another H3, but now this is the only H3 I have inside of each card. So I'm thinking I don't need this right now. I don't think I need it. I'm going to leave it in there, but I don't think I need that. In fact, let's comment it out. So if I do need it, it's there and I can just uncomment it. But like I said, I was playing around with this, all right, before class. So there's output, and we'll put the H3 in there. And I'm going to say margin top 1 rem. You know what I think I will do? So I'll just grab everything that was in here. All right. And I'm going to put it in here. We'll see if that screws things up or if it makes it better. You're going to see it when I do in just a minute. All right. We also had our paragraph. All right. And let's align that to the center. Okay, and that's probably about all I'll have to do with that. And then we also had our button in here. All right. And again, I was very blah with the way that I made this. Right? And like I said, you'll know as soon as I do if I screwed anything up. So that's what it looks like now. I'm going to have to work on that. Is the one that I meant. That is I think either the H2 or the H3. But the rest of it, well, this looks like it didn't center. All right, these buttons did not center, but the rest of it doesn't look too bad. And it looks like these pictures are almost right up against this H3 here. So let's quickly change those. And where we've got portfolio samples, let's change that as well. All right, so coming back into here where it says portfolio samples, that was the H2. The ID was portfolio and it's an H2. So let's go back up, way up here, before my cards, right here. All right, so dot portfolio, H2. All right, and I believe that we made the size of those all 3 rem. Could be 2, but I'll try making it 3. And that's all I'm going to do to it. All right, is that. And then for the button, I don't know if just a text align center will do it or not, but we'll see. It didn't, and this didn't change either. Now, why would that be? I know I saved that. Save. Card output button. Well, that isn't changing, and that isn't changing. All right. So it is 10:41. Let me try to fix this. So let's take till 10:50. That'll be our break. 9 minutes. Come back in 9 minutes, and what's left is to come down here and build the contact area, and then build our footer, and then add our media queries, which are not going to be very long. All right, so please come back, like I said, at 10:50. And I'm going to look at this in the meantime. All right, fix that. Button's not a class. All right, it is 10:50, so I'm going to continue on. I brought up Rankin's uh, web page because I wanted to mention something to you, and I don't know if I've said this to you or not, but out on Rankin, there is something, I think it's in here, called the Rankin Connection. All right, and I'm hoping it finds it. So you might have to look for it. It should be here under Career Services. All right, but there's a thing in under Career Services. You can sign up right now if you want to. And what it'll do is it'll ask you a couple questions and you'll get weekly emails. So you'd say, well, I don't want those. Yeah, but you can say, I want emails for like web or programmer or whatever. And then anything that Janie Summers, who is our jobs person, any ads that she gets in for those, all right, will be made available to you. All right. Now, you don't have to do this, but I just think it's a nice thing to have. Again, it's the Rankin Connection. So you might have to search for it a little bit. And what'll happen is you'll get stuff that'll look more like, let me show you one that I got today, like this. All right. I don't know why it's not showing me the pictures. It usually does, but there we go. All right. So it says latest jobs. Now, I haven't gone and chosen a category, so it shows everything. All right. Notice IT technician, IT support technician, etc. All right. Now you don't that, but I would strongly suggest, and I mentioned this to you the other day, you really should go out to LinkedIn.com, LinkedIn, LinkedIn.com. You should go out there and you should set yourself up a profile. All right. You're just making yourself known out there. I've got 2 or 3 people that I have dealt with in the past. They're IT recruiters. So occasionally they'll get a hold of me and say, I'm looking for somebody who is a database person, or I'm looking for somebody who is a programmer or a web developer, etc. And I can give them your name. And the first thing I know that at least with one of them, she worked for Kforce. I'm not sure if she's still there or not. Her name is Megan Mueller. All right. And she's actually come in and talked to my classes before. But one of the first things that she tells me she does is she goes out on LinkedIn and looks at your page. All right. So she can get some kind of an idea a little bit about you. So it's another thing you hopefully you'll consider doing shortly. Now, it looks good now, but I'll show you quickly what the 2 errors I had were. Number 1 was portfolio is an ID. I put dot there. So instead of having # portfolio H2, I had dot portfolio H2. That was the first problem. And for my image, the problem was I had dot button, and button was not a class. So I took the dot off. And as soon as I did all of that stuff, made those 2 changes, as you saw, it now looks like this. Now, just so you know, probably what you'd want to do is you'd probably want to take both the button that's here, all right, and your picture, maybe the whole thing, and make them clickable. Because right now where it says get the source, it doesn't do anything. You'd probably want to change the cursor to a pointer and go to that repo out on GitHub. All right. Again, not that you have to do that, but probably it would be a little bit more professional type of thing for you to do. The only other thing I wish I would have done in here, and I don't think it's going to matter too much, but I'm going to put a border radius in here and we'll make it 10 pixels. All right, just to give it a little bit of a rounded look on the buttons. All right. And it doesn't look like it did anything. Oh, I'll have to look at that then, because that is correct. Border, radius. Okay. All right. What's left? Well, now when you look at this, when I come in here and I open this with Live Server, there's my home, there's my about, there's my portfolio. Okay. Well, what we don't have, as you can see, is the contact. And again, this is about the third or fourth time. Well, now I've got my roundedness in my buttons. There we go. This is about the third or fourth time we've looked at forms. We're still going to have a chapter on forms later, and we will literally build one from scratch. All right. But until we get to that point, I'm just going to give you what I did here. So I'm going to go back into my HTML, and I've now finished that section. All right. And really, when you think about it, it's not that big. I'm only at about 130 lines. All right. So finally, section ID equal contact. And again, class equal page. All right. And now we're going to put this in. I'm going to start with an H2 because that's what the other one started with. And I put in here contact me today. Okay. All right. So that's my start. And then I'm going to put in my form. I'm going to give it a class that I'm just going to call my form. I can call it whatever I want. All right. And inside of there, there's going to be a bunch of divs. I'm going to start with a div that's going to hold kind of everything. It's going to have a class that's going to be equal to row form. All right. And now I'm going to have in here a bunch of divs for each one of my fields. So I'm going to have in here div class equal name. And this is going to be the person's name. I could have separated it into first name and last name. I didn't. So label for equal name, name. All right. And input type equal text, simple text box, ID equal name, name equal name. And if you look at this from just a little bit I've done, there we've got that. Contact me today with name. I know it looks pretty ugly. We'll style it a little bit. All right. But the reason I showed you that is now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to grab that div, copy it in about 3 times. Now it's giving me errors because I can't have the same ID. So after name, I'm going to have email. All right. So this will be email, as will this. And this will be, the type will be email because it's email. Again, email for the name and for the ID. All right. So I've got that. Then I'm going to have a subject. All right. And finally, I'm going to copy it down one more time, but I'm going to make changes to it. And that's going to be, I'm going to have an area where you can send a message or enter a message. So this is going to be called message, as will this and this. Now, because the message could be potentially multiple lines in length, all right, I'm going to not make that an input. I'm going to get rid of this thing right here, and I'm going to make it a text area. And the text area allows you to have multiple lines. So I'm going to say ID equals message, name equals message, and then I can set the size of the box up. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say that it's going to have, I don't know, 50 columns. So cols equal 50 and rows, we'll make it about 10. All right. And notice as soon as I close this, it puts the ending text area tag in there. Okay. Then finally, on the bottom, I'm going to put in a button. And again, I tried to keep this really simple. Submit. That's it. That's everything. Now it's not styled. So again, it's not going to look very good. But you notice my stuff is all in there. Contact me today. The name label with a text box for name. All right. The email label with a text box for the email. The subject with a text box for the subject. Now, what I can do, I didn't do this, but I'm going to put it in now anyway. And that is, if I want to make sure that you put your name in there, I can type in the word required. All right. And I can do the same thing for an email. All right. But I'm not going to make the subject or the message required. But now you'll notice with these, if I come back here now and I click submit, I get a message. Please fill out this field. All right. So it's just asking for a name. So I've got a name in there now. And if I leave the email out because that one was required as well, I get please fill out this field. And if I make it so it's not a real email, so if I put hello in there, it says, hey, you got to put an @ sign in there, etc. Okay. So now we've got that. So let's go back in and style it now. All right. So I'm going to jump back then into my, do a file, save all here, or save, I should say, and go back into my styles now. All right. After we get done with this, really all that's left in here is the footer. And that won't take really any time at all because we're going to have a very simplistic footer. So we started by saying we had a class called myForm. All right. And as we've done many times here, we're going to start with a display flex. And we'll use flex direction column because we do want to make sure that that stacks in a columnar format, not in a row format. All right. Justify content. And we'll use space around. Again, there's other ones you can use as well. We'll give it a minimum height here. And I just randomly put in here 500 pixels. All right, and I didn't convert it over to rems. So I'd have to just divide that by 16. So it'd be what, 31, something like that, 31.25 rem, I think it would be. Like that. All right, let's move this up a little. And again, I put a background color in here and I used black, but I put it at 0.5. So this is background color RGBA, and it's 000 with a 0.5. Now it's going to look possibly a little bit different, but I didn't do my roll form stuff yet. So it's not probably going to look very different right now. All right. Put the box around it. We didn't do this. I should do that first. All right. I'm not sure why that is going down. That should have come down to like here, but that was an H2. So let's do that one. So let's do that before we even do this. So let's come in here and say it. All right. So this was what? That H2 was in the section called with an ID of contact. So ID of contact, H2, and I think we were making all those with a font size of 3 rem, and we were doing a text align center. All right, let's make sure that that worked. So that looks a little bit better there. And again, now I should be able to jump to any of my 4 areas. Okay, all right. Now let's start playing with this because that's pretty ugly. All right. If you don't like the background, of course, you just change it to a color you'd more prefer. All right. So we did my form, and then we also had one called row form in here. And again, we're going to do the display flex. Justify content. I use the space between. Oops. The width, I made 80%. That's 80% of that box that it's in. And then we wanted to center it with a margin 0 auto. And let's go down because there's a few things we have to do here. All right, you might remember we've got a name, we've got an email, and we've got a subject, and then finally, we've got a message. So let's look at these because this has changed around from when I did it originally. I played around with it a little bit. So I may have to change this last one here. I don't know. All right, so I want to apply that to all 3 of these. All right. Again, because I like to do this, is do a little bit and then take a look at it. Whoa, that doesn't look very good. Something's going to have to change there. All right, we'll fix it. Well, originally when I did this, I had the name and I had the email, but I did not have the subject in there. So let me remove that for now. And I may have a div that's been misplaced too. I'll have to look at that. All right. Uh, let's see. You know, you typically put these each on their own line, but and I should be consistent because name came before email. All right. And we've got the message, which again is in the text area. All right. Then we've got the button. I don't think we gave that a class, but it is inside of row form, I think. All right, so there's our button, but before we even do our button, we really should do our labels. So those are the only labels that we have in here, so I don't need to preface them with anything, really. All right, well, you can see that's screwed up. Let me go back and look, because that does not look very good. So let me go back and look at the HTML here from the top. H2, row form, subject, message. Okay, I'm trying to remember why I did this. That's why I'm really sorry I lost this last night. But this div that's right here, I think I ended it right before the subject, like that. All right, then div subject and the message, which means I now have probably one too many divs. And when I did this, I put the button in here because I was having a hard time, even though it looks like it worked just fine. I put it in there. There. Now I'm hoping it got fixed. All right, that looks better. All right, there's still stuff that can be done in here. You can see it. If you don't like the white, etc., if you don't like some of the stuff, I could have put some more margin and padding in there. That probably would have looked a little bit nicer. All right. So we could have taken all these and added some, some padding and some margin, etc. It looks okay the way it is. It's not fantastic, but it looks okay. The button here, all right, that needs some work. So let's look here. So for that button, all right, it's now inside of it. And I think I did that because it was easier to style that way. So I'm going to change this to dot message button. All right, 70, 100, 0, looks okay. All right, that's a pretty big button. So again, we could pretty this up quite a bit. All right, I'm not going to argue with anybody on that or deny anybody that. But again, now I can go back to home, to portfolio, I can go back to home, and finally to contact. All right, so two more things that we have to do here. Number one, we want to go in and we want to set up our footer, and then we'll do our media query. I kept the media query simple in that I said that with a max width of 640 or below, and 640 is kind of a standard size, all right, um, when you're working in the tablet area. Maybe that wasn't the best number, but it's the one I picked. So let's come in and first come back in here and let's write the footer. All right. And again, of course, that's outside of main. So I'm in here now. My footer was almost remarkably simple. I put in a paragraph. All right. I did give this a class called footer. You don't have to. All right. There are people that I know, developers that I know, virtually anything that they could conceivably be manipulating using CSS, they'll either give a class or an ID to. All right. There's only one footer in here, so technically it's not mandatory at all. So I put the copyright symbol. And I promised you it was simple. That's the whole thing. All right. So then file save. Again, it has no styling to it yet, but there it is down at the bottom. Okay, that's good. So let's quickly style it and then we'll do our media query. Even the styling, there wasn't really all that much in here. Again, it had a class of footer. All right, I gave it a minimum height of 100 pixels, which is 6.25 rem. Aligned the text to the center. Gave it a color, the text. Again, we can just make it white. All right, gave it a background color. And again, just made it black. All right, gave it a font size of 1 rem and gave it some padding. That's it right there. So file, save. Let's take a look at it again. And there it is. All right. So the only thing left to do is right now, again, if we look at this, it is not right now. It doesn't actually look terrible, except some stuff, as you can see, is cut off here. All right. So on a 1 to 10, it maybe is a 2, but let's put in a media query, all right, with a few things in here that we will reset stuff so that, when we are at a certain size, okay. Now I'm just going to put it in here. We could have put it into a separate file like we did the other day, and then put some code into our program that said when it was a certain size. But I just did it right here. All right. And this isn't going to be long. It's 20 or 30 lines. So remember, you can say add media and start, or you can say all. All right. And that covers everything. Or you can say screen. And I think there's print, and I think there's speech as well. I'm just going to say all. That should cover everything. And a max width. Again, I just picked up 640 pixels. If you wouldn't like that, if you don't like the way that looks, of course, it would be fair for you to change this, but this is what I did. So the nav bar, these are my links. Cut the font size down. Heck, let's make it 1 rem. Okay. Hopefully that'll work. Height correctly. There you go. The nav bar itself. So really that one I should have put up above this one. All right, so my nav bar A, there's only like 3 or 4 more to put in here. So we want to make sure, so this is the key one here, is to do the flex direction column. All right, couple more here. Okay, one more. Right now, the name and the email, those two things right now, I'm going to move this up. But right now, the name and the email are on the same line. And it looks kind of okay, but it looks a little crunched. So again, for our media query, what we're saying is for the name and for the email, we're just going to give each one of them a width of 100%. So they'll each go on their own line and display block. All right, so that's everything as far as the media queries. So at between 1 and 640 pixels, we're cutting down the height of the nav bar. The links, we're making them the text smaller and the height for them smaller. All right, we're basically for the card, we're just saying automatically do your flexing. For the row and the row form, we're setting the direction to column as opposed to row. And for these last two in here, again, we're stacking them for lack of better words. All right. This is what I finished right before class. So we'll see if it still looks okay or if it doesn't look okay in just a second. So there it is. All right. You can see how the size has changed. All right. I probably should have done more work in changing the size of that heading too. It's kind of big right now. Could do the same with that one.